Thief! Amos Carver bellowed, his boots slamming the riverbank as he stormed toward Takoda with a posse of snarling men. Takoda's carving knife froze mid-stroke, wood shavings falling like snow, as Carver shoved Awinita into the icy river, her scream piercing the dawn. Fury surged in Takoda's chest. His fist met Carver's jaw, sparking chaos and a warrant for his arrest, chaining him to a desperate choice: flee with his broken sister or surrender his freedom. Takoda, a 29-year-old Nez Perce woodcarver and fisherman, lives in the shadow of Idaho's rugged hills in 1897, haunted by the loss of his parents in a brutal clash with the U.S. Army. His heart aches for his 17-year-old sister Awinita, whose spirit is scarred from abuse at a boarding school, her silence a daily reminder of his vow to protect her. Secretly, he loves Ellen, a kind white nurse, but their forbidden bond draws scorn from both their communities. Torn between scraping together money for Awinita's doctor and shielding her from a world steeped in prejudice, Takoda stands at a crossroads, his every step weighed by duty and defiance. Takoda's hands trembled as he guided Awinita, her clothes dripping and clinging to her shivering frame, back to their small hut by the Idaho River. Her wide eyes stared blankly, clutching a sodden sketch of a fish, its colors bleeding into ruin. He knelt, wiping her face with a rough cloth, whispering, "You're safe now, little one," though his voice cracked with doubt. Awinita's silence cut deeper than the bruise on his knuckles from striking Carver. He glanced at the door, half expecting the thud of boots, and bandaged a scrape on his hand, wincing as it stung. Takoda grabbed a sack, stuffing in a few carved statues, their wooden faces glinting in the dim light, his only hope for coin. Awinita's fingers tightened on his sleeve, her fear a mirror to his own, urging him to move faster. He looked out at the river, its current a reminder of the freedom they might lose, and swore to keep her safe, no matter the cost. Ellen's knock was soft but urgent, her nurse's bag slung over her shoulder as she stepped into the hut. Takoda's heart lifted at her familiar face, then sank as she saw Awinita curled in a corner, shivering. "What happened?" Ellen asked, her voice tight with worry, as Takoda recounted the riverbank clash, his words sharp with anger at Carver's cruelty. She knelt by Awinita, checking her pulse, her brow furrowing at the girl's vacant stare. "She needs a doctor, Takoda," Ellen said, but his shoulders slumped, his pockets held only dust. He shook his head, refusing her offer to find a doctor, fear of Carver's men outweighing hope. Ellen pressed a small vial of medicine into his hand, her touch lingering, sparking warmth he couldn't afford to feel. "I'll come back," she promised, stepping into the dusk, leaving Takoda staring after her, torn between gratitude and the ache of a love he could never claim. Awinita whimpered, pulling his focus back, her need anchoring him to their fragile shelter. In the town's smoky saloon, whispers grew into a roar as men swapped tales of Takoda's attack on Carver. A grizzled farmer swore he saw a blade in Takoda's hand, the lie spreading like wildfire. Mrs. Carver, perched at the bar, fanned the flames, her voice shrill as she branded Takoda a savage. Sheriff Langston strode in, his badge glinting, silencing the crowd with a raised hand. "He's a danger," he declared, vowing to haul Takoda in. A boy piped up, claiming he'd seen Takoda near the hut at dawn, and Langston's eyes narrowed. He summoned Floyd, Carver's brutal right-hand man, ordering him to lead a posse into the hills. Word reached a Nez Perce hunter, who slipped away to warn the tribe, his steps heavy with dread. In the village, Hinmat, the elder, listened, his face grim, fearing the clash would tear their fragile peace apart. The air thickened with rage and suspicion, a storm brewing over the river. Takoda sat by Awinita, her shallow breaths filling the quiet hut as he wrestled with his choices. Surrender might spare her, but the thought of chains burned his pride. He traced the scars on his hands, remembering his father's last stand against soldiers and his mother's plea to protect Awinita. His sack held only a few coins and carvings, not enough for a doctor, let alone escape. He packed medicine, a blanket, and his carving knife, its weight a grim comfort. Awinita watched, her nod faint but resolute, trusting him despite her fear. Takoda scrawled a note for Ellen, his pen shaking. "We're leaving. Forgive me." As the sun bled into the horizon, he led Awinita out, her hand small in his. The hut stood silent behind them, a fragile home he might never see again, its walls echoing his vow to keep her free. The forest swallowed Takoda and Awinita, its shadows cloaking their hurried steps as they dodged the main trails. Awinita stumbled over a root, her gasp sharp. Takoda caught her, checking for injuries, his heart racing. Distant barks of dogs echoed, snapping his head up, and he pulled her faster, whispering, "Stay close." He led them to a shallow stream, its cold water masking their tracks as they waded through. Awinita's teeth chattered, her grip on his arm fierce, her fear fueling his resolve. They reached a small cave, its mouth hidden by vines, and Takoda settled her on a bed of moss. He stood guard, eyes scanning the dark, every rustle a threat. Awinita's voice broke the silence, a faint, "I'm sorry," her guilt, a knife in his chest, and he knelt, promising she was no burden, though the weight of their flight pressed hard. By a trickling stream, Takoda built a makeshift camp, shielding Awinita under a canopy of pines. He spread a blanket, urging her to rest, but her cheeks flushed with fever, her eyes glassy. He soaked a cloth in the stream, cooling her forehead, his stomach knotting as she murmured incoherently. His sack held only Ellen's vial, half empty, useless against her worsening state. Takoda kindled a small fire, its glow hidden by rocks, praying it wouldn't betray them. Awinita called for their mother, her voice a child's, and Takoda's throat tightened, memories of their parents' warmth flooding back. He held her close, singing a Nez Perce lullaby, his voice breaking as her fever burned on. The river's hum outside their shelter mocked his helplessness, urging him to act before time ran out. In the dark, Takoda rocked Awinita, her fevered murmurs fading as he spoke of their father, his hands rough but gentle, teaching him to carve. He saw their mother smile, heard her songs by the river, now lost to the violence of 1880. The memory of soldiers' gunfire, their father's fall, and their mother's desperate shield over Awinita clawed at him. Awinita's fingers twitched, clutching his sleeve, as if sensing the tale. "I'll keep you safe," he whispered, echoing his father's last words, though doubt gnawed at him. The fire's embers glowed, casting shadows on the cave walls, a fleeting warmth against the cold night. He kissed her forehead, her breath faint, and resolved to fight for her, no matter the odds. Sleep took her, but Takoda's eyes stayed open, fixed on the dark, guarding their fragile hope. Floyd's voice barked through the forest, rallying his posse as dawn broke, their dogs straining at leashes. He crouched, tracing Takoda's bootprints near the river, a sneer curling his lip. One man held up a torn scrap of Awinita's shawl, and Floyd's eyes gleamed, scenting blood. He split the group, sending half along the ridge, their rifles glinting with intent. "Bring him alive," he growled, promising coin to the man who caught Takoda. The dogs bayed, noses low, leading them closer to the stream where Takoda had passed. Floyd paused, catching a faint whiff of smoke, his grin widening at the thought of cornering his prey. A Nez Perce scout watched from a distance, heart pounding, then fled to warn the tribe, knowing the hunt would bring blood. Takoda's breath caught, as the dogs' howls grew louder, their menace closing in. He stomped out the fire, ash stinging his hands, and scanned the cave for signs of pursuit. Near the stream, a small wooden bird, intricately carved, lay half hidden in the dirt, its craftsmanship alien to his own. His pulse quickened. Someone was watching. friend or foe, unknown. He pocketed the statue, its weight a mystery, and lifted Awinita, her body limp against his chest. "We have to move," he whispered, her fevered nod his only answer. He carved a quick mark on a tree, a Nez Perce sign for protection, and plunged deeper into the forest, branches clawing at them. The dog's barks faded, but fear clung to him, a shadow he couldn't outrun. Awinita's fever spiked, her skin burning as she mumbled Takoda's name, her voice a fragile thread. He laid her on a bed of ferns, checking her pulse, his fingers shaking at its faint flutter. The last drops of Ellen's medicine dribbled into her mouth, but her eyes stayed glassy, unseeing. Takoda crushed herbs from the forest, a remedy his mother taught, pressing them to her brow, their bitter scent sharp. "I'm weak," Awinita whispered, guilt in her eyes, and Takoda cupped her face, vowing she was his strength. Desperation clawed at him. Without more medicine, she wouldn't last. He gazed at the stars through the trees, pleading for guidance, then decided to risk returning for Ellen's help, his heart heavy with the danger ahead. A twig snapped in the dark, and Takoda's hand flew to his carving knife, his heart pounding as he shielded Awinita in the forest's depths. A shadowed figure emerged, cloaked in a scarf, eyes glinting under a hood. "For your sister," the stranger whispered, tossing a small vial of medicine at Takoda's feet. Takoda hesitated, demanding, "Who are you?" But the man, the woodcarver, pointed to the wooden bird in Takoda's pocket and shook his head. Before Takoda could press further, the woodcarver melted into the trees, leaving only silence. Takoda clutched the vial, its contents a gamble, but Awinita's fevered moans pushed him to act. He dripped the liquid into her mouth, praying it wasn't poison, and her breathing eased slightly, sparking a flicker of hope. Kneeling beside her, he whispered promises of safety, though the mystery of the woodcarver gnawed at him, a puzzle as dangerous as the posse hunting them. Takoda's chest tightened as Awinita's fever lingered, her frail form barely stirring on the fern bed. He tucked a blanket around her, carving a Nez Perce protection symbol into the cave's dirt floor, its lines a plea to their ancestors. His sack held no more medicine, only the wooden bird and his knife, useless against her illness. Kissing her burning forehead, he murmured, "I'll be back, little one," his voice thick with fear. He slipped through the forest, dodging moonlit trails to reach town, each step heavy with the risk of capture. Carver's men could be anywhere, their dogs sniffing for his trail, and the thought of leaving Awinita alone clawed at him. At the forest's edge he paused, glancing back, her safety the anchor pulling him toward Ellen and the hope of more medicine. Takoda steeled himself, whispering a prayer for strength, knowing this gamble could cost them everything. The town slept under a starless sky as Takoda crept into the hospital's shadowed yard, his breath shallow. He tapped on the storeroom window, and Ellen's face appeared, pale with shock. "Takoda!" she hissed, opening the door, her eyes scanning for danger. Inside, she bandaged his wounded shoulder, her hands steady but trembling as he described Awinita's fever. "She's fading," he said, voice breaking, and Ellen pressed 2 vials of medicine into his palm, her fingers lingering with unspoken care. She whispered about overhearing Carver's talk of unused land, her words stirring Takoda's suspicion. "I'll dig deeper," she promised, but their moments shattered as footsteps echoed outside. Takoda slipped into the dark, Ellen's worried gaze burning into him, her courage fueling his resolve to save Awinita and uncover Carver's scheme. Floyd's boots crunched near the hospital, his lantern casting jagged shadows as he spotted movement in the storeroom. He pounded on the door, growling, "Open up, nurse!" Ellen's heart raced, but she smoothed her apron, feigning calm as she unlatched the lock. "Just checking supplies," she lied, her voice steady despite Floyd's glare. He shoved past, rifling through shelves, his breath hot with suspicion of Takoda's presence. "You're hiding that savage," he spat, but found only bandages. Ellen held his gaze, defiance masking her fear. Even as he leaned closer, threatening to tell Carver, he stormed out, barking at a lackey to watch her, his footsteps fading into the night. Alone, Ellen sank against the wall, her hands shaking, vowing to protect Takoda and Awinita, no matter the cost to her own safety. Takoda raced through the forest, the medicine vials clinking in his pocket, his shoulder throbbing but ignored. Awinita lay where he'd left her, her face ghostly in the cave's dim light. He knelt, giving her the new medicine, his fingers brushing her clammy skin as her eyes fluttered open. "You came back," she whispered, and Takoda's heart ached, nodding as he told her of Ellen's bravery. He unwrapped the wooden bird, its carved eyes seeming to watch, a riddle he couldn't solve. A distant rustle made him freeze, hand on his knife, but it was only a deer, its eyes glinting in the dark. He rebuilt the fire, its warmth a frail shield, and held Awinita close, her trust, the only thing keeping despair at bay. The night stretched on, heavy with the weight of their uncertain tomorrow. Morning light filtered through the pines as Takoda scouted the stream, his eyes catching a glint of glass half buried in mud. He pulled out a vial, its label faded but reeking of the same sour stench as the river where fish now floated dead. His gut twisted. This was no accident. He tucked it into his sack, next to the woodcarver's bird, sensing a connection to Carver's schemes. Awinita stirred, her fever down but eyes still dull, watching him with quiet faith. He scanned the woods, finding no trace of who left the vial, but the river's sluggish flow screamed of poison. Takoda's jaw clenched, the vial a weapon he'd wield against their enemies, its truth a spark in his growing resolve. He returned to Awinita, vowing to unravel the mystery before it claimed them both. Takoda sat by Awinita, the cave's chill seeping into his bones as he traced the vial's edge, memories of the river flooding back. He saw his father casting nets, fish leaping in the sunlight, a life now choked by death. "The river was our heart," he told Awinita, his voice low, her nod faint but understanding. Their father's words echoed, "Protect the land, it's our blood." The vial's stench linked to the fish kills, a deliberate wound to his people. Awinita scratched a fish into the dirt, her fingers shaky but defiant, a silent vow to fight. Takoda gripped her hand, their shared grief forging a new strength. The river's distant murmur called him to act, to expose the poisoner and save what remained of their home. A shadow moved beyond the cave, and Takoda's knife flashed, ready for Floyd's men. The woodcarver stepped forward, his scarf loose, dropping a wooden tree carving and a scrap of paper. "Carver's camp," he rasped, pointing at the note scrawled with a location. Takoda demanded, "Why help us?" But the man's eyes, heavy with secrets, gave no answer. He gestured to follow the paper's path, then vanished, his steps silent. Takoda unfolded the note, its ink stark against the dawn, pointing to a truth he couldn't ignore. He tucked it beside Awinita, kissing her forehead, promising a quick return. Her weak smile urged him on, but the woodcarver's motives churned in his mind, a dangerous ally in a deadly game. Night cloaked Takoda as he crept toward Carver's camp, its fires flickering beyond a wooden fence. He scaled it, heart-hammering, dodging a guard's lazy patrol. Inside Carver's tent, he rifled through papers, his fingers brushing letters between Carver and a man named Baxter. The words "unused land" and "timber deal" burned into his memory, a betrayal of his people's home. He stuffed the letters into his shirt, sweat beading on his brow. A guard's cough made him dive under a table, holding his breath as boots passed. The vial from the stream weighed heavy in his pocket, its purpose clearer now. Takoda slipped out, the camp's glow fading behind him, his mind racing with the scale of Carver's greed. Takoda's blood roared as he clutched the letters, each word a dagger. Carver planned to steal Nez Perce land, forging claims of unused territory for Baxter's timber empire. A second vial, identical to the streams, sat on Carver's desk, its label confirming the poison killing the river's fish. The plan was vile, to drive his people out by starving their waters. Takoda's hands shook, stuffing the vial and letters into his sack. His vow to protect Awinita now a war against this betrayal. A lantern flickered, footsteps neared. He leaped through the tense flap, sprinting into the forest as a shout rang out. Floyd's voice roared, "He's here!" And a gunshot grazed Takoda's arm, pain searing but not stopping him. He vanished into the trees, the truth in his hands, a heavier burden than the wound. Takoda's arm burned where Floyd's bullet grazed him, blood seeping through his sleeve as he stumbled through the forest, the stolen letters and vial heavy in his sack. Carver's camp faded behind, but Floyd's furious shouts and the crack of gunfire echoed, spurring him faster. He ducked behind a pine, gasping, checking the papers were safe, their inked betrayal fueling his rage. The wound throbbed, but Awinita's face flashed in his mind, her fevered trust pushing him forward. He tore a strip from his shirt, binding the injury, wincing as it tightened. Dogs barked in the distance, their howls a closing net, and Takoda sprinted, branches clawing his face. He reached a stream, splashing through to mask his trail, the cold biting his skin. Collapsing against a rock, he clutched the evidence, his heart pounding with the weight of Carver's plan to steal their land and poison their river. In the cave, Awinita's eyes widened at Takoda's bloodied arm, her weak hands fumbling to help. He knelt, letting her wrap a cloth around the wound, her touch gentle but shaking. "I found the truth," he said, showing her the letters, his voice low with fury as he described Carver's plot. Awinita's face hardened, her nod fierce despite her fever, whispering, "We fight." Takoda pulled out the vial, its poison a grim twin to the streams, and her fingers traced it, defiance sparking in her eyes. He stoked the fire, its warmth a frail shield against the night, and sat close, their shared resolve a quiet strength. A rustle outside made him grip his knife, but it was only wind, yet the fear lingered. Takoda held her hand, promising to stop Carver, her trust the anchor keeping him from despair. Floyd's fist slammed the hospital door, his snarl echoing as he cornered Ellen in the storeroom. "You helped that savage," he accused, his lantern casting harsh shadows on her pale face. Ellen stood firm, claiming she was sorting supplies, her voice steady though her heart raced. Floyd tore through shelves, finding nothing, his eyes burning with suspicion. "Carver will hear of this," he spat, shoving her against the wall, locking the door as he left. Ellen's knees buckled, but she clenched her fists, thinking of Takoda's desperate plea for Awinita. She found a nail in the corner, scraping at the lock, her hands trembling with urgency. Floyd's voice barked orders outside, assigning a guard, but Ellen's resolve hardened, her loyalty to Takoda and Awinita outweighing her fear of Carver's wrath. Takoda led Awinita through dawn's mist to the Nez Perce village, her steps faltering but determined. He found Hinmat by the fire, his elder's face stern as Takoda begged to speak. "You bring trouble," Hinmat said, but Takoda laid out the letters and vial, his voice urgent, detailing Carver's land theft and river poison. Hinmat's eyes narrowed, skeptical, accusing Takoda to stir unrest. Takoda's chest tightened, but he spoke of Awinita's suffering, his love for her a plea for trust. Hinmat fingered the vial, his silence heavy, then agreed to a tribal meeting, his gaze still wary. Takoda supported Awinita as they left, her weight a reminder of his duty. He whispered thanks to her, his hope flickering as the village stirred, uncertain of their support. Awinita stepped forward in Hinmat's lodge, her frail frame trembling but eyes fierce. "I was broken at the school," she said, her voice soft but cutting, recounting the boarding school's cruelty. She described Carver's shove into the river, her panic, and Takoda's defense, her words piercing Hinmat's doubt. Clutching Takoda's hand, she called him her protector, her strength, a quiet fire. Hinmat's face softened, his fingers tracing the vial as he listened. "We must see the truth," he said, swayed by her courage. Awinita sank to a mat, exhausted, her smile faint but proud. Takoda knelt, whispering his gratitude, his heart swelling with her bravery, knowing her voice had shifted the tide. Before the tribe, Takoda stood tall, his voice ringing as he held up Carver's letters, exposing the plan to steal their land. The vial gleamed in his hand, its poison a crime against their river, and gasps rippled through the crowd. Some warriors nodded, fists clenched, ready to fight, but elders hesitated, fearing white retaliation. Takoda spoke of his parents' deaths, urging the tribe to honor their legacy, his passion stirring hearts. Awinita raised her sketch of a fish, its lines bold despite her weakness, a silent call to action. Hinmat stood, vowing to confront the truth, and the tribe roared, though doubt lingered in some eyes. Takoda's chest swelled, hope battling fear as the village united, their voices a rising storm. Hooves thundered as Sheriff Langston's posse charged into the village, rifles gleaming. "Where's Takoda?" he bellowed, accusing him of assault. Men tore through tents, scattering pots and blankets, as women shielded children. Langston grabbed Hinmat, pressing a gun to his temple, demanding Takoda's surrender. Takoda pulled Awinita behind a lodge, his heart racing, slipping the letters to a boy to hide. Shots rang out, sparking panic, and Takoda's eyes met Awinita's, her fear mirroring his. He whispered, "Run," guiding her to the forest's edge, their steps muffled by chaos. The village burned in his mind as they fled, Hinmat's capture a wound he swore to mend. Ellen's fingers bled as she pried the storeroom lock with a nail, the metal finally giving way. She slipped out, heart pounding, dodging Floyd's guard in the hospital yard. At a friend's house, she scribbled a note for Takoda, warning of Floyd's hunt, her hand shaking with urgency. The courier nodded, promising delivery, as Ellen heard boots nearby, Floyd's voice barking orders. She ducked into an alley, the night's chill biting her skin, her thoughts on Takoda's desperate eyes. Ellen resolved to find him, her courage aflame against the danger closing in. She whispered a prayer, stepping into the dark, determined to reach the forest. Takoda crept to the sheriff's outpost, its lanterns casting long shadows as he spotted Hinmat tied inside. A lone guard dozed, rifle slack, and Takoda slipped in, cutting Hinmat's ropes with his knife. "You risk much," Hinmat whispered, gratitude softening his eyes, his trust in Takoda growing. They crept out a back window, dodging a patrol's lantern, Takoda's pulse hammering. He led Hinmat to the village, handing him to a cousin, relief mixing with dread for Awinita. Hinmat gripped his shoulder, promising to rally the tribe, his faith a spark in the dark. Takoda turned back, Awinita's safety pulling him through the night, his resolve ironclad. The woodcarver appeared at the forest's edge, his scarf loose, beckoning Takoda to a hidden shed near Carver's camp. Inside, Takoda found more letters, forged deeds to Nez Perce land, his blood boiling at the betrayal. The woodcarver handed him a carved river, whispering, "End this at the town hall." Takoda pressed for his motives, but the man's silence held firm, his eyes haunted. He pointed to a trail, urging haste, then vanished, leaving a carved mark on the shed. Takoda clutched the papers, their weight a call to justice, and ran to Awinita, the woodcarver's aid a riddle he'd unravel later. Takoda slipped into a quiet village under dawn's gray light, his sack heavy with Carver's damning letters and the poisonous vial. At a small post office, he handed the bundle to a grizzled clerk, his voice low as he explained the urgency of reaching a federal reporter. He scratched a note, detailing Carver's plot to steal Nez Perce land and poison their river, his hand steady despite his racing heart. The clerk nodded, promising swift delivery, and Takoda paid his last coins, their clink a final sacrifice. He glanced back at the forest, Awinita's frail form waiting, her life tied to his gamble. As he left, a posse's distant hoofbeats made him duck into an alley, fear spiking for the letter's safety. He whispered a prayer to his ancestors, begging for the truth to reach the right hands, and hurried back to the cave, Awinita's need pulling him through the morning chill. Her shallow breaths greeted him, a reminder of the stakes, and he sat vigil, hope flickering like a fragile flame. Smoke curled skyward as Baxter's men torched the shed where Takoda found the letters, flames licking the night. Takoda watched from a ridge, his stomach sinking as the evidence he'd trusted burned to ash. Baxter's laugh echoed, his men scattering embers, ensuring no trace remained. Takoda clutched the few papers he'd kept, their words now his only weapon, their weight crushing. He thought of Awinita, her fevered eyes, and cursed his failure to act faster. A guard spotted him, shouting, but Takoda melted into the trees, his heart pounding with despair. He stumbled to the cave, Awinita's weak voice asking, "Is it gone?" He nodded, unable to lie, but her hand squeezed his, urging him to fight on. Takoda stared at the river, its poisoned flow a mirror to his fading hope, yet her trust steeled him to find another way, no matter the cost. Awinita's coughs rattled in the cave, her fever surging as she curled tighter under the blanket. Takoda pressed a damp cloth to her forehead, his hands trembling as the last medicine vial sat empty. "I want to see the river," she whispered, a voice a ghost, and his throat tightened, nodding though it broke him. He recounted their childhood by the water, fish darting under their father's nets, hoping to anchor her spirit. The cave's chill seeped into his bones, mirroring his fear of losing her. He checked his sack, finding only the letters and the woodcarver's bird, useless against her pain. Takoda held her close, singing a Nez Perce lullaby, his voice cracking as her breaths grew shallower. Desperation clawed at him, and he resolved to find Ellen again, her help their last chance, even if it meant risking capture in the town's hostile streets. Ellen's cloak flapped as she reached the forest's edge, her eyes scanning for Takoda's camp, a farmer named Jed trailing her. Jed, once Carver's laborer, muttered about seeing Carver dump poison in the river, his guilt pushing him to help. Ellen handed Takoda a small bag of medicine and bread, her face etched with worry as he described the burned shed. "The reporter might still help," she said, her voice firm, though her hands shook. Takoda's eyes met hers, gratitude mixing with forbidden warmth, their brief embrace of fleeting comfort. Jed shifted nervously, warning of Floyd's patrols, and Takoda nodded, tucking the medicine away. Ellen squeezed his arm, promising to watch for the reporter's response, her courage a beacon in his dark. As they parted, Takoda glanced back, her figure fading into the trees, his resolve bolstered by her faith, Awinita's life hanging in the balance. In a clearing, Takoda sat with Ellen and Hinmat, the air thick with urgency as they planned a stand at the town hall. Hinmat's eyes burned, vowing to rally the tribe, his trust in Takoda now solid. Ellen suggested calling on sympathetic whites, her voice steady despite the risk to her place in town. Takoda assigned a young warrior to guard the letters and vial, his hands steady as he outlined their public reveal. Awinita, though weak, scratched a banner's design, her trembling fingers tracing fish, a symbol of their fight. Takoda checked his knife, its blade a grim promise if Carver's men struck. They knelt together, praying to their ancestors for strength, their voices blending in the dusk. Takoda's heart pounded, the town hall their last chance to expose Carver. Awinita's fading strength urging him to act before it was too late. The woodcarver stepped from the shadows by the river, his scarf falling to reveal a weathered face, eyes heavy with regret. "I worked for Baxter," he confessed, voice rough, admitting he saw the river poisoned. He handed Takoda a new witness, a clerk who'd copied Baxter's forged deeds, his testimony, a key to justice. "I lost my own to greed," the woodcarver said, his pain mirroring Takoda's. He vowed to stand at the town hall, a final act of redemption. Takoda gripped his hand, gratitude warring with questions, the carved river in his pocket a silent bond. The woodcarver urged haste, pointing to the town, then slipped away, his steps fading. Takoda stood alone, the clerk's nervous nod fueling his hope. The coming fight a storm he'd face for Awinita and their land. Takoda rallied the tribe at the village's edge, their faces set with resolve as Hinmat assigned guards for Awinita, her fever too fierce for the march. Ellen returned with 3 white farmers, their nods firm, risking their own for justice. Awinita handed Takoda her banner, fish and rivers, bold despite her shaking hands, her eyes fierce with pride. He tucked the letters and vial into his coat, their truth his shield against Carver's lies. Takoda warned the group to stay calm, even if Floyd's men provoked them, his voice steady but heart-racing. They practiced chants, "Save our river," ringing through the trees, a call to the world. He knelt by Awinita, promising victory, her weak smile cutting deeper than any blade, her life, the fire driving him to the town hall. The town hall's steps swarmed with Nez Perce and allies, their banners high as Takoda climbed a crate, his voice booming. He read Carver's letters, each word a hammer exposing the land theft, and held up the vial, its poison a crime against their river. The crowd roared, fists raised, as Ellen recounted Floyd's threats, her courage sparking cheers. Jed testified, his voice shaking but clear, naming Carver's poison dumps. Awinita's banner, held by a warrior, fluttered, its fish a silent cry, though her absence ached in Takoda's chest. The woodcarver pushed through, his clerk witness detailing Baxter's forgeries, their words igniting fury. Takoda called for justice, his heart pounding as the crowd's chants shook the hall, a tide of truth Carver couldn't silence. Carver stormed the town hall steps, his face crimson, shouting, "Lies!" as he jabbed a finger at Takoda. He denied the letters, calling Takoda a savage stirring trouble, his voice dripping venom. His men fanned out, hands on rifles, itching for a fight. The woodcarver's clerk stepped forward, naming Baxter's forged deeds, his calm words cutting through Carver's bluster. The crowd jeered, hurling stones, one grazing Carver's cheek, drawing blood. Carver drew his pistol, aiming at Takoda, his eyes wild with rage. Takoda stood firm, Ellen's hand in his, their defiance a wall against the threat. The crowd surged, their chants drowning Carver's threats. A storm of justice ready to break, Takoda's heart racing with a fight he'd ignited. Sheriff Langston pushed through the crowd, his badge glinting, face tight as the mob's fury pressed in. He hesitated, eyes darting, sensing control slipping. A white farmer shouted support for Takoda, joined by others, their voices tipping the scale. Langston raised a hand, ordering Carver's arrest, his voice flat but firm, more to calm the crowd than seek justice. Carver screamed, "Traitor!" thrashing as deputies cuffed him, his men lowering rifles, outnumbered. Takoda watched, his breath short, knowing Langston acted from fear, not righteousness. The crowd cheered, their victory raw. But Takoda's eyes sought Awinita's banner, her absence a hollow ache. Ellen squeezed his hand, her strength steadying him as the hall echoed with the crowd's triumph, a fragile hope rising from the chaos. Awinita's banner slipped from her trembling hands, her knees buckling as she crumpled to the town hall steps, the crowd's cheers fading into a distant hum. Takoda's heart lurched. He shoved through the throng, dropping to her side, his arms catching her frail form. Her face burned, fever painting her cheeks red, and Ellen knelt beside them, her fingers probing Awinita's wrist, her eyes dark with dread. "She's too hot," Ellen whispered, urging Takoda to get her to shelter. He carried Awinita to a nearby hut, her shallow breaths cutting him deeper than any blade. "Stay with me," he begged, her eyelids fluttering, a faint whisper of, "You won," escaping her lips. The crowd's eyes followed, their silence heavy with worry, and Takoda clung to her, willing her to hold on, the victory outside hollow against her fading light. Inside the hut, Takoda cradled Awinita, her body small against his chest as he dribbled water between her lips. He spoke of the crowd's triumph, how Carver's men had backed down, his voice soft to keep her calm. Awinita's lips curved, a ghost of a smile, murmuring, "I'm proud," her words a fragile thread. Ellen brought fresh medicine, but her face fell, admitting it might not be enough. Takoda's throat tightened. He sang a Nez Perce lullaby, its notes trembling, memories of their mother flooding back. He held the wooden fish carving, pressing it into her hand, its smooth curves a link to their past. The hut's shadows grew long, and Awinita's grip weakened, her breath slowing, yet Takoda whispered promises, refusing to let despair win. A federal reporter, coat dusted from travel, strode into the village, his notebook open as he sought Takoda. He read the letters Takoda sent, his eyes narrowing at the vial's toxic label, confirming the river's poison. "This is big," he said, scribbling Jed's testimony and the clerk's account of Baxter's forgeries. He snapped a photograph of Awinita's fish banner, its bold lines a symbol of their fight, and Takoda's voice broke, sharing her sacrifice. The reporter vowed to publish the story, his pen scratching furiously, promising justice. Takoda's chest ached, Awinita's fevered form in the hut pulling his thoughts, but the reporter's grip on his shoulder offered hope. He left to file his story, and Takoda returned to Awinita, the weight of her struggle heavy, yet the truths spread a spark in the dark. Federal marshals stormed Baxter's mansion, their boots echoing as they seized stacks of forged deeds from his desk. Baxter bolted for the back door, but a marshal tackled him at the train station, cuffs snapping shut. They hauled him to jail, his shouts of innocence ignored, while crates of letters linked him to Carver's scheme. The reporter's telegram reached Takoda, its words brief but electric. Baxter arrested. Takoda read it aloud to Awinita, her eyes closed, hoping she heard. He sat by her, the hut's quiet pierced by her ragged breaths, and clutched her hand, the news a bitter victory without her smile. The marshal's search continued, uncovering more evidence, and Takoda prayed it would save their river for her. Mrs. Carver, pale and trembling, faced the marshals in her parlor, her hands twisting as they pressed for answers. Fear of prison broke her. She confessed Carver's plan to poison the river, her voice cracking. She handed over hidden letters, their ink tying Carver to Baxter's greed, her tears falling as she admitted knowing too long. The reporter took her statement, his pen racing, the story growing sharper. Word reached Takoda, a village boy relaying the news, and he nodded, relief mixing with grief. He looked at Awinita, her face still, and whispered, "We're close," vowing to finish her fight. Mrs. Carver's regret lingered in his mind, a shadow of guilt he'd never carry, his love for Awinita pure. The timber company's wagons rolled out of Idaho, their retreat announced in the reporter's blazing front-page story. Federal orders barred land grabs, protecting the Nez Perce River, its waters now under guard. The tribe gathered by the bank, their chants rising in a Thanksgiving ceremony, drums echoing through the hills. Takoda stood among them, his heart heavy, Awinita's absence a wound. Hinmat clasped his shoulder, naming him a hero, his voice proud but soft. Takoda carved a new fish statue, placing it by the water, its curves a tribute to her. He joined the chant, his voice breaking, feeling her spirit in the river's flow. The victory was theirs, but without her, it felt like a half-breath, a promise he'd keep for her memory. Awinita's breaths grew faint, her chest barely rising as Takoda held her in the hut, the world outside celebrating. He whispered of the river's salvation, how her banner had rallied them, his voice thick with love. "Thank you," she murmured, her smile faint, eyes closing as peace settled over her. Her hand went limp, and Takoda's cry tore through the silence, his heart shattering. Ellen knelt beside him, tears streaming, her arms around him as grief swallowed them. He clutched Awinita's fish sketch, its lines blurred by his tears, her spirit etched in every stroke. The hut's walls seemed to close in, and Takoda rocked her, vowing to live for her, her sacrifice the fire in his soul. Floyd, wild with rage at Carver's arrest, slipped into the village, his pistol gleaming under moonlight. "You ruined us!" he roared, aiming at Takoda by the river. Takoda faced him, unarmed but unyielding, shielding a child behind him. Floyd's shot went wide, splintering a tree, and warriors tackled him, binding his wrists. Takoda's voice was steel, ordering Floyd turned over to the marshals, his eyes burning with Awinita's loss. The village stood united, their strength crushing Floyd's defiance, and he was dragged away, cursing. Takoda sank to his knees, the river's hum a reminder of her, his resolve hardened to protect their home, no matter the pain. Takoda sat by the river, Awinita's fish carving in his hands, its wood warm from his grip. He saw her sketching by the water, her laughter now a memory that stung. He prayed to their ancestors, asking them to guide her spirit, his voice a whisper in the dawn. The woodcarver's bird statue lay beside him, its mystery unsolved but its aid unforgettable. Takoda carved a memorial mark into a stone, Awinita's name eternal by the river. He stood, feeling her courage in his bones, vowing to fight for their people. The water flowed, clear again, and he walked back to the village, her loss a weight he'd carry forever. The Nez Perce lands stood safe, Carver and Baxter locked in cells, their plot exposed by the reporter's words. The river ran free, fish returning, a testament to Awinita's fight. Takoda, hailed as a hero, walked the village, his carvings now symbols of resilience. Ellen stood by him, their hands brushing, her quiet strength, a new beginning despite old prejudices. Awinita's sacrifice burned in his heart, her sketch framed in the lodge inspiring all. He carved daily, each statue, a vow to their heritage. The tribe held a ceremony honoring her, and Takoda spoke her name, tears falling as the river sang, her spirit alive in their victory.